Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Business of Gaming podcast. I'm Josh with Game Haven Guild, and today I'm here with Jamison Sachs, one of the co-owners of Common Ground Games with his husband in Dallas, Texas. Jameson, can you tell us about how you got into gaming?
I've kind of always been into gaming. I'm a nerd from really young. I actually started a lot with video games when I was younger because I have a minor motor dysfunction. And I was probably one of the few people that a parent has ever heard from a doctor, make this kid play video games. And it really did help. But that also kind of ignited a love of gaming and that sort of thing throughout my life and everything. And I've actually worked in comic book and game stores off and on from anywhere from part-time to running other game stores since I was about 14 years old. And so I have over 30 years of experience in the industry at this point. And so I've always just been around games and just have always really enjoyed playing games and have always managed to find friends who are into it as well.
Was the goal always to own a store?
No, actually, it probably really wasn't. Like I said, I'd been working in other stores and I worked for other people. So I saw a lot of like how hard it really is and that sort of thing. But I always seemed to be able to bring myself into it and that sort of thing. But I'd actually gotten out of it and gone to the corporate world because I wanted things like insurance and like better pay. And, but I still, even at those times would help out stores and keep up with friends and that sort of thing in those stores. And then, my last corporate job, I kind of got to the point of having like more or less like a midlife crisis. But I was listening to NPR one morning on the way to work, and I really wish I would have wrote it down, but this woman had written a book and they were talking about it. And she said that one of the things we're raised with in this country is do what you're good at, do what you're good at, do what you're good at. And she said, that's so toxic because you should do what you love because you can become good at anything. And I sat there and I was like, oh, and as I was working that day, I started thinking about it and I was like, I'm good at this IT work, but what I really loved was working in like the comic and game stores. And I was more into the gaming at this point. By the time I came home that night, I had half of a business plan written. So like I kind of jokingly say it was a midlife crisis, but it was time for me to get out of working for other people. And I come from a family that owns a lot of its own businesses and like does more like customer facing stuff. And so it was more natural to me.
Well, that crisis to opening the store, what was that timeline like? What did you go through?
It was actually only 6 months, which is insane, really, when you think about it. Like, I came home on a day in November with this crazy idea, and my husband was like, "Okay, let's talk about this. You know, you're clearly passionate about this idea." And 6 months later, the store was open. We opened up on Free Comic Book Day in May of 2013, which was like a May 4th, actually, I think. Because we actually opened up right next to a comic book store that I used to work for, and I was friends with the owner. And so we had a line of people outside of our door all day long because of Free Comic Book Day.
It's a good timing.
Yeah.
That location choice, did you look at a lot of different locations or what went into choosing your current location?
So location was something like on our mind. Like we actually lived like almost a half hour north of where we actually opened up. And that's one of the hardest things to do. A lot of game stores, a lot of comic book stores think you have to be in the middle of like where all the kids live. I learned running other stores, kids don't have money, their parents do, and their parents drive. So the comic book store, Zeus Comics, they had moved for the third time, and they had found this location that kind of seemed like it was off the beaten path a little bit, but in reality, it was in between two highways, and it's one of the most traversed roads in Dallas for a lot of neighborhoods. And so that it's actually really incredible. And as we were talking more, and I realized he doesn't do gaming. Unless it had a controller, he had no idea about games. So he didn't really want to do them in his store. And it kind of made sense to put it there. Like when I started looking up statistics, the population density around there and how easy it would be for so many of the different neighborhoods in Dallas to get there. We are less than 10 minutes from downtown, from Highland Park, from Oak Lawn, from Bishop Arts, like all these different parts of Dallas that needed a game store. Because at that point, basically, you had to drive either 40 minutes west to Generation X or 40 minutes north to Madness. There was really kind of nothing in the central Dallas area. And so it kind of was a perfect location, really. And we kind of also opened up right before a lot of the rents started really going up a lot more. So we got a really great deal at the time that we were able to keep.
Well, tell us about that first year. What was maybe the biggest thing you struggled with right after opening?
I think in a lot of ways we're sort of unicornish. my years of experience in the industry really made a difference. Like, one of the things most stores struggle with is when they first open is they order a lot of stuff and they don't know the right product mix. I knew to go wide and light to figure out what people wanted. Like, I'd actually assumed we would be selling magic, but I really wasn't into magic those days anymore. It turned out to be that we had a voraciously hungry group of people who didn't want to have to drive so far for magic. So we very quickly became a magic store without really intending to, and stuff like that. Our biggest hurdle became really quickly is we very smartly decided to start small. Our first space was only 1,500 square feet. And we ended up having to expand within the first year. Like, the shoe store next to us had closed, and it was an additional 2,400 square feet or 2,500 square feet. And it just, at that point, we were already like, almost every night we were having events. Our space was full and things like that. We very clearly needed more space and to be able to do more things. And so we went through that process real fast. It was great that our landlords were really accommodating for that too. We had got lucky with the first landlords who were pretty much like, oh, the space is empty, take it. Like, we would rather just have money.
So you went from 1,500 to 4,000 square feet. How has the location evolved since then?
So since then, even after a couple of years, we started to see like that space kept growing and our product mix kept growing and things like that. And so about into year 7, we realized, oh, we need to expand again. The space next to us was also to the expansion was now empty, and we had intended to take that over. However, my husband and I were getting married, and dealing with a wedding and a store expansion at the same time was too much. So we kind of put the landlord off a little bit. We told them we were very interested, but we couldn't deal with that right now. When the wedding was over, literally like 2 weeks later, I was like, hey, let's finish talking about this. And they were like, oh, sorry, we rented that space. And I was like, you could have just let me know that was serious, and I would have just thrown money at you guys and dealt with it later, right? But so we had to kind of deal with that. And then it turned out, like, as we were trying to figure that out and we kind of dealt with what we were dealing with, we started kind of looking around and seeing different things. But the landlord sold the building. And so right about then, we had also decided, like, the new landlords were kind of like, hey, there's this space in the corner that's 10,000 square feet. And we were like, oh, that's really interesting, because it would need to be completely demolished. And it's like kind of like almost like a triangle, like a wedge design. And so there was a lot we could do with that. And then the pandemic happened. And so they wanted us to sign the new lease 2 days before Dallas announced its shutdown. And unfortunately, luckily for us, a lot of our customers actually worked in City Hall and things like that. We'd already been told this was going to happen. Like, it was a done thing. And we were like, we're going to hold off on that. But that actually also kind of worked in our favor a little bit, because we would have, that big of a space would not have been good for the pandemic style that we went to. But we were able to continually negotiate with them during the pandemic and because they weren't selling any more space. So we actually were able to get a lot more new things for that space. Like, they'd replaced all the AC units, and they were willing to do some other things like replace all the lighting, and without actually adding anything to what we were going to be paying, which was really nice. And then it took the city like almost a year to approve it. They apparently thought we were a gambling parlor, and we had to again get one of our customers who had connections down there to kind of casually ask about it and kind of thing. And he found out that no, they thought we were a gambling parlor, and it was going to need to be rezoned, and they didn't want to deal with that. And we were like, no, like, we're an existing business, Google us, kind of thing. Literally like a half hour later after that inquiry, we had like all the approvals and everything just started moving. And so in April of 2022, we moved into this nice, big, beautiful 10,000 square foot space that we are already pushing the limits of.
Well, 10,000 square feet is a lot. Any regrets on going that big, or?
We actually grew into the space so quickly that it kind of has blown my mind a little bit. Like, if you go into our store most evenings, we can sit 140 people in just the open play space without rearranging anything. And it's 3/4 to completely full, like, most nights of the week when we're having events and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, okay, we maybe should have just thought on a bigger scale, I guess. But yeah, so we're already kind of looking at what we're going to do about that right now.
Crazy. That's good.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, we have had, this is, what year is this? 2025. So we've had 12 straight years of growth, which is kind of unheard of for most small businesses. A lot of it I attribute to also like hiring the right people. We have done a great job of just like finding the right people that fit with us really well. And so we've been really lucky on that over the years too, because we have people that really believe in our store and our vision and that sort of thing.
So supporting a store that big, you've created obviously a very big community around it. What do you think were the key pieces to building that community both early as well as now that have a huge operation?
So one of the things that really got me, because I was going to game stores and stuff in Dallas before we opened ours, and I realized really quickly, like, the customer service seemed to be a side note. Like, before I even opened up, I wanted to see what every game store in Dallas and DFW really was doing. And so friends and I would go out for a couple weekends and just go to a whole bunch of different game stores. We realized only one of them did anybody greet us, which to me is like a number one thing for customer service. Like, when somebody comes in a store, you should at least say hello to them. Like, they should need to know that like there's who to talk to, if they need help or anything like that. And so it was really bizarre to me that like this had kind of become this weird sort of like, it's getting popular, but like a lot of them don't like it. They still want it to be like this kind of elite sort of thing for them. And we didn't like that. And then also growing up gay, having worked in other game stores and stuff like that, they're all tended to be very white run, owned, and well, sure, I'm a white dude, but also I'm a gay Jewish man. And so like, I kind of understand like how some people need to like know that there's somebody there who's kind of looking out for them. And so we did lean pretty heavily into like making sure people understood that like this is a safe space and that sort of thing. And over the years that has really grown and that sort of thing. Within the when my first employee found us because we were put like on a safe place to go in Texas blog kind of thing. And then like some of the trans blogs would be like, hey, if you like gaming, just go to this place. They are very welcoming and that sort of thing. And that sort of stuff makes a difference, despite what some people think, and we don't discriminate against anybody unless you have hate in your heart. We want that part of our name, Common Ground Games, comes from that idea of we want this to be a common ground for everybody. A thing that a lot of stores don't realize is how important community is. If you're doing events and everything, you need to make sure that it's a very open and accepting and inviting community. I think that was one of the reasons that during the pandemic, we were able to keep going so well, because the people were invested in the store. It's like, it's their store in a sense of like, this is where they go and spend their time. It's their third space. One of my friends, sorry, this makes me a little, he sent me this picture last night because one of their friends was in town last night. And so they got all together, the 5 of them. They've been friends for a decade now because they met playing Magic together at the store. And he sent a picture last night because they met up to play Magic last night at the store. And like things like that it's like, that warms my heart to know that these people are lifelong friends now, that sort of thing. And there's people that like their kids are playing in the store with them now. When they first started coming in, they weren't even married, and that sort of stuff, it means a lot to a lot of people. And for them to always feel like, no matter when the employees change and stuff like that, to know that this is always going to feel the same for them is a really big deal.
So growing the space like that, how has your employee count grown? You started with a few and now many?
I started with none, actually. In a 1,500 square foot space, it was, at first, we didn't know how busy we were going to be. Like, so I had one, I had none. And not quite a year into it, we were like, okay, we need to have somebody else. I can't continuously work 80 hours a week at minimum. And so we grew employee count kind of slowly. It's a big expense. And we also believe in like paying people fairly and things like that. And we want to treat people well and that sort of thing. But over the years, we've grown and we've had people leave. We actually have a really, really high retention rate for retail. Our oldest employee lasted 9 years. She was actually my first employee. She eventually became a store manager. We have an employee who's been there for over 6 years now, currently. But we are, as of 2 weeks ago, we have 17 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. And that's besides my husband and myself. So it's a lot, but it's necessary. And one of the things that's really hard sometimes to wrap your head around, like, this is an added expense, and it's a lot. But what we've found is that every time because we actually had to replace somebody just recently and added a number. Every time we've grown that employee count, our business has gone up to kind of accommodate for it, because we're able to do more things and help more people, and that's that's really what you want out of the employees. Like that should be the goal. Like you should see like your workload go down and like the store get better because of it. I've heard some people refer to it as like, oh, it just causes more problems, and I'm like, that something's wrong then, because employees shouldn't be problems; they should be a benefit.
How's marketing changed in terms of what tools you're using and or what's been working for you?
Marketing is a hard one these days. Like, you'll hear a lot of things saying traditional marketing is dead, and I think in a lot of ways they're right. People on TV, they largely ignore commercials unless something that's already they're interested in catches their eye. We've focused mostly on social media marketing over the years. Facebook, Instagram, now TikTok. Putting yourself out there, putting your store out there, not just showing images of product or, hey, we have an event, but showing the personality of your store generates much more marketing and that sort of thing than anything else. I mean, we've done some things with local newspapers and that sort of thing, and some of the magazines, but it's kind of iffy as if there's really that big of a return on investment. We generally kind of look at that as, again, more like just creating relationships with other businesses in the area and that sort of thing. And we definitely get eyeballs on it, but again, I'm not 100% certain if like print media is the way to go these days. I'm sure some of those people would kill me for saying that, but we try our best to kind of get the word out of everything. During the pandemic, we created a Discord server that something I kind of was like, oh, are we really going back to these things? And I was like, it's for video games. And it took a life of its own. We have thousands of people on it. My store manager did a great job of reconfiguring it. Because he was really into the Discord stuff, and he reconfigured it, and it made it in this, it's really functions well, and a lot of it is really automated, and we have a couple people who help volunteer to admin it and everything. But he did such a good job that he actually gives talks at Gamma about like setting up Discords for stores, and other people have paid him to help set up their Discord. So like it's really kind of neat to see some of that stuff, and it's fascinating to watch our customers and stuff. Like, some of the channels on there are very active, with a lot of people just talking back and forth and asking each other questions, and so it's very interesting. And it's just a great way, because they can stay connected even when they're not at the store, and it really reinforces that third space kind of theory thing.
You opened the store, you had a certain set of challenges around opening. Now you've been running it for 12 years. What kind of challenges do you have now that you didn't necessarily have then?
Nowadays, we lived through the pandemic. We got kind of lucky during the pandemic. I pivoted really fast and really hard. I spent the 2 weeks Dallas was in shutdown to changing our website. Our website used to be purely kind of informational. I put our entire product line on it, and it connected it to our POS, and you could order things, and we started doing delivery. That turned out to be a big boon for our business, because it put us in front of so many people who thought that they were going to just buy this one game and suddenly became addicted to board games, and it grew our customer base tremendously during that. And nowadays we've been dealing with shipping shortages and tariffs, and the fact that we're in a TCG boom again. So they can't print enough of anything. All the printers are like at their maximum capacity, and there's no room for anything else, and so we're having to deal with rising prices and a fluctuating market space. And it's interesting because we're having to kind of balance out, like, okay, where can some of this stuff, like this cost, go? Like, I'm a big believer of, like, if people tell us this is a tariff cost, we put that on the game. Like, we have the products that literally have another sticker on it that say like $340 of this new price is a tariff tax, because I really believe people need to understand that nobody is paying it for that but them. Like, again, it sucks. Unfortunately, some of the companies just raise their prices to deal with it, and so we don't really have a good indicator of how much. But when somebody says, why did this game go up $5? It's generally because of tariffs right now. And unfortunately, the tariff stuff, is causing a lot of companies to slow down their shipping. They're trying to play the game of like, well, when is it going to be the lowest price so I can get it out? And so a lot of things have been delayed, and like it's been we'll call the word fun juggling act of like, okay. And then, you'll have weeks where like, it's very clear everybody said ship because like in a 2-week period, our receiving dock is just filled with things every day, And that's the other part. The other challenge these days is there are so many new games coming out and so many things. And it's not even like it was like 6 years ago where like half of them, like you could ignore it because let's be honest, they weren't going to stick around, but there's a lot of good games. And it's to the point where like some good games aren't even getting like really noticed because there's just so much coming out, and so you're having to kind of pick through the noise. And it's really nice that a lot of customers have realized that like I generally try and put things on the shelf that like when I ordered it, there was something about it that made me think that our customers are probably going to want to play this, and that's part of doing this is just having to constantly research everything and kind of taxing in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm more or less the store's buyer at this point. Like that's my main role. I have people doing everything else, and so I'm the buyer and the final decision maker on a lot of things.
Well, when you're looking at that many games, how are you picking what to bring into the store?
I always say it's kind of voodoo. A lot of it is intuition, like reading the descriptions, looking at like pictures and stuff and going, okay, would I want to play this? I find BGG is a really great place to parse through comments and just kind of seeing like what the overall sentiment seems to be and that sort of thing. But unfortunately, you can't take it as like gospel because you'll get the reviews that start off with, I don't like these type of games, but here's why this is a bad game. And it's like, what? Why are you reviewing this game if you don't like it, or like that type of game? So it's just kind of this weird thing. And then you have to go by, like, are the designers have their previous games been really big? Are the publishers there's certain publishers that I'm always going to order a minimum amount of everything they put out because they've done a lot of the work to say, we're publishing this because we believe in it, So it's just a lot of different little things. And it's really hard because sometimes I've been really lucky. I've got very few like really bad misses where my employees are staring at a mountain of product going, what do you expect us to do with this? It's more often than not, like stuff will come in and they're like, why did you order so much of this? And then like 2 weeks later, they're like, you didn't order enough of this, So it's just like that little thing. And luckily I have a lot of employees who like games and like, sometimes they'll come over to me and be like, hey, are we getting this? Or you need to go back this on Kickstarter because we do carry a lot of Kickstarter stuff. Unfortunately, Kickstarter became a big thing. And years ago, I realized that I want stuff from there. Other people do. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to have to put their money in for something they're not getting in a year and stuff. And so we do that. And it saves a lot of people money on shipping and things like that by just being able to get it directly from the store. And a lot of the companies have gotten to the point where they offer us, as long as I'm willing to pay the money as part of the Kickstarter, we get the same thing any other backer would. There's still a couple companies that don't seem to want to do that, but most of them have kind of gotten to that point.
Well, going forward, what do you see as future issues or opportunities for your store and or the industry?
I and several other people think there's going to be we're in a TCG bubble. We saw this. I saw this in the 90s, and the, when Magic made everybody all of a sudden make TCGs and that sort of thing. I think the non-IP TCGs are going to have a real hard time surviving. I think there's a couple of them, even with an IP, that the companies haven't handled exactly right. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. But every other week, I keep getting solicited for a new TCG, and I just don't understand, if they're not paying attention to the marketplace and that sort of thing. I think there's a really good opportunity for diversified stores like mine. The bigger store, I think a lot of these people are opening up card game stores, and we're in a bubble. They don't know anything about anything other than that one or two TCGs that they play. And I think they're going to be in real trouble when the product is able to catch up and people can get it anywhere again and not pay above market price or above MSRP and things like that. I would love to be able to sell people 400 boxes of Pokemon again, but I can't get it. They're just, and they're stretched so thin, and so many of these little stores have popped up, and they have to send some to everybody, and it's kind of annoying, But I definitely think for diversified stores, there's a lot of opportunity for making sure they have the right product and keeping their customers happy, like with the lines of things that are always going to be there, like Games Workshop, certain board games, making sure that they are keeping their the mainstay TCGs and supporting them and that sort of thing, and also watching out for newer games that are going to be around for a while and that sort of thing. You can never really tell, but you have to kind of pay attention to what the buzz is. I don't think a lot of people expected 2 years ago Flamecraft to become an evergreen game, and because it was such a flash in the pan kind of hit immediately, and we still sell multiple copies of it every month 2 years later. And so it's just okay, so now you just have to watch out for those things and be ready for them at the end of the day. And a lot of that is managing your money. You have to be able to be ready to spend the money when you need to for things that you think you can make your money back on.
So you have the store, but you're also doing convention sales as well. Can you walk us through what got you into bringing your store to conventions?
So the only convention we really did, we had done QuakeCon in the past. Actually, we were the first tabletop room they ever set up was us. But then, and we only did that a little bit for a couple years. But then I was a longtime attendee of BGG-Con, and Board Game Geek has their own convention every year for people who don't know, twice a year, actually, spring and fall. And Fun Again used to be kind of the general retailer for them. And they at one point kind of imploded, and they had to cancel like a month before the show. And they were kind of scrambling because they weren't going to have a retailer there. And the publishers were saying, hey, the publishers who don't like to sell it, they just like to send things to somebody so they can focus on demoing. We're like, hey, how are we going to do this now? And one of the other people at a different publisher had told the BGG-Con people, hey, I've dealt with Jamison over at Common Ground Games. He's local. He can handle this. And so they contacted me, and we were like, sure, we can put this together in 3 weeks. It happened to be the weekend Keyforge came out. We broke the con that weekend. They'd never had the selling. When they opened up, everybody just went to our booth because we had 6 unreleased games and Keyforge and all this sort of stuff, and it was wild. And so we've been their general retailer now for 8 years. And it's just, this is a community I love, and we're part of it. And we work with a lot of the different publishers to be here and have their games and that sort of thing so that they can have a presence here without needing to send their own people, stuff like that. And we actually even demo some of the games now, which is great because that really makes them sell a lot better when people can actually see what's going on in the game. And it's just, convention sales can be weird for a lot of people. You just have to find what the audience of the convention, what the product mix that they want is. And so for us, we're the newest things that are unreleased and stuff like that. And people have gotten used to that from us from here. And that's what we try and provide for them.
So for people looking to get into the industry, maybe start their own store or do something else, maybe make a game, what advice would you have for them?
If you want to start a retail store, you really, 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 really need to look at your population density in the area. I see people trying to open up stores and they're like, well, this one store doesn't do it the way I think they should, or they don't carry the thing I think I should. And I'm like, yeah, but that's a town of 50,000 people and there's already 4 game stores, and discounting is not going to, at the end of the day, people who discount long-term rarely end up surviving, because if that's all you can offer people, you've kind of missed the mark. It's a very difficult industry. Like I said, I used to work 80 hours a week. It took the pandemic to make it so that I go home at 6 o'clock at night. That's when I finally learned, I have enough employees. I don't need to be here at night. They can handle these things. We've trained them well and that sort of thing. And it's specialty retail. So you have to have a love of it, and you can't sell things you don't understand. If you're a TCG store and you don't play board games and you put board games on your shelf, you're not going to be able to sell those things to people. You're not going to be able to talk to them. So random people who come in, you're going to turn them off real quick. You have to be able to actually have a passion about the products, because they can go buy it on Amazon and stuff like that. But Amazon doesn't have game space. They don't have people who can tell them about it, that sort of thing. We have the local Target. People will come over to our store because they were trying to ask somebody at Target about this. And the employee was like, there's a game store 10 minutes from here. You should go there. And I find that hilarious. They don't even want to be bothered. So they would rather just send somebody over here. And that's great though, because at least they know about us and they understand that, kind of ecosystem and that sort of thing. And I think that's the biggest challenge for a lot of people is they don't, there's stores like mine, and I think we make it look easy, and it's a very, very stressful job. Like, people don't understand that most retail, at the end of the day, once you've paid everything, your employees' bills and everything, has about a 5% margin for profit margin. And that's considered good. Like, the bigger things run on a smaller margin, which is insane to me. But, so you're working on some very thin, like, things. And so you have to have some pretty good safety nets and that sort of stuff. And the other thing I see a lot of too is people like keeping their day job and that sort of thing. And they do it part-time. And I'm like, I always joke that I basically threw myself off a cliff to start this job. And my husband likes to say that we were grateful that there was a community there to catch us, but at the end of the day, if you can't put yourself into the job where that's your job, you're always going to just kind of be doing something rather than being something, and it's hard. It's hard. And the other thing is too, is it's kind of easy to throw some tables up and some things and put some TCGs into a thing, and you can do it really cheaply now. But like game stores, like, we had a lot of money to start. Like, we invested a lot, and so that we could have the right things and that sort of thing to be open with.
Jamison, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Of course.